We'll get underway here. There's quite a few of you online, so happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to Inside Our Nation Live with Redblacks General Manager Marcel Desjardins and Head Coach Paul LaPolice. Fellas, good afternoon.
What's up, Pop?
Hello.
Oh, not too much. Just hanging out in the home office here. Always a pleasure to be able to see faces, especially the two of you. So thanks for joining us here. Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à cette séance de questions-réponses avec Marcel Desjardins et Paul LaPolice. Nous sommes très heureux d'avoir tellement d'entre vous ici. So let's get this going. We'll start with you, Coach. What's isolation like for you right now? You're in we're calling it Redblacks HQ West at this point. What's going on?
Yeah, Redblacks West is going well. We are. I have a nice office set up, and we're able to. The coaches have been great with the technology, so we try to have usually a daily conference call, at least Monday through Friday, and we just got off a call a little while ago, and we try to do as much as we can from afar, right? Whether it's working on the playbook, and some of the systems are good, so we can all share the same stuff. This morning we talked about our practice plans from a daily basis, how day 1, day 2, and day 3 would look, and just trying to do our best to keep talking football and making sure everybody's communicating.
And how about you, Marcel? I recognize your backdrop there. You get to sneak into the office on occasion to give yourself a little change of scenery.
Yeah, I mean, I have a great setup at home, but every once in a while, whether it's for change of scenery or just for ease of downloading film on my laptop and just having a different environment, I slip by the office and can get a lot done. So, our group as a personnel staff obviously just got through, the whole process of the draft and making those selections last week. And so now we're on to the next phase, which is the global draft and just brainstorming in terms of what we want to do to take advantage of the different environment that we're in at this stage, as we prepare for an eventual start of the 2020 season.
Great, and we'll get into all of that. We've had quite a few questions come in over the last 24 hours or so, and more rolling in now. So just a quick housekeeping note to those of you online. There's been a few variations of questions about when the season might start, how teams are preparing for that kind of thing. As much as we'd like it to be all up to us when we fill TV place, it's ultimately a CFL decision, and a lot of planning is going into that. So we can't really give too much because we don't know at this point when the season's going to start and what that might look like. So just for those of you that have asked that question, we're still waiting. We're preparing. I think I can speak for you guys that we're preparing so that if the season started, anytime now, we'd be ready to go. So don't have a lot to give on when the season will start. I know that's a concern for everyone right now, but we'll certainly keep you updated as that continues to unfold. So, but maybe we can start with Marcel. Just to that point, how do you plan, and how do you kind of keep your priorities in order and your everything in focus when you're not really sure when things are going to get back to normal?
Well, I mean, as I stated, our off season has been very much like any other off season from the standpoint of what we had to accomplish. How we went about accomplishing those things was obviously different, certainly since the middle of March. So that part of it wasn't too different. I mean, meetings online versus meeting in person, you still, again, get the information you need and all of that. Moving forward, as I stated, we have to plan for the what ifs, and we have to plan for an eventual start of the season. So for us now, we're just in the process of prioritizing what those things are. So the global draft is one of them that we're preparing for, and we'll be watching a lot of film on. And then at the same time, what we're doing is, because we have, we won't have it at training camp right away, we'll have more time on our hands. What other pieces to the puzzle can we add to add depth and to add layers to what we do from a scouting perspective and just from an overall football ops perspective?
And then to you, Coach, what was this like for you? That it was a first draft for you as head coach of the Redblacks here, a little unconventional, but ultimately the same goals and some great success in the draft world this year. What's been preparation been like for you at this point while you're home in Winnipeg?
Yeah, I guess the biggest difference was just not having the chance to sit with the offensive coordinator, the linebacker, and the O-line coach watching film together, or maybe sitting with Marcel and some of the coaches watching tape together. That was a thing that was kind of disappointing. We didn't have that ability, but I thought the guys, the nice thing about, we have a veteran staff who know the league, and they really did a good job of targeting guys we felt could help the roster, and certainly Marcel did a great job with that process. So it was pretty organized and detailed process, we felt, even though we weren't in the same building.
And all right, well, let's go to some of the questions coming in live right now about the draft, since we're talking about it. Bill DeHoog is asking, saying that he likes all the changes so far, loves the picks of the drafts. Two questions. First question, was there ever any thought about picking a receiver, Marcel, with the first pick?
Well, I mean, since we were 6th overall, we had to see how things played out. We did have a receiver rated relatively high, and that may have been an eventuality. But when it was our time to pick, the receiver that we wanted was no longer there. So I'm kind of making that one obvious. And, we just felt that Adam O'Clair was the best choice for us.
And can you touch on that a little bit? Obviously, we have a history of selecting offensive linemen in the draft in the first round, with the exception of Antoine Pruneau. Why deviate, I guess, from that this time around? What was it about Adam O'Clair that made that decision an easy one for you guys to make?
Well, I mean, just in general, the depth of the O-lineman, certainly the higher end O-lineman in the draft wasn't there as it has been in previous years, at least in our opinion. I mean, there were some good ones, but not necessarily ones that were worthy of being taken there at 6th overall. And then with respect to Adam, I mean, again, just a player who is smart, athletic, physical, versatile, very much pro ready. Which is something that a lot of the Laval guys have going for them. And he made it a very comfortable choice. It was a discussion, honestly, with respect to also maybe taking Michael Hoyt, who was still there. But with his signature in the NFL with the Rams, we just weren't willing to risk that at number 6. But when number 10 rolled around at the start of the second round, we certainly were more than comfortable to make that pick at that point.
Great. And I'll go over to you, Paul. This is from Michael. It says he's very happy to have you on board. He just wants an idea of what our offense is going to look like this year. I guess a high level look at what you're envisioning. He wants to see more QB rollouts, getting inside receivers more involved. But in your mind, what is it shaping up? Maybe different than in previous years that we've seen here in Ottawa.
I can't really speak to previous seasons, but I certainly think running the football is part of what we want to do. Doing our best to find ways to create explosive plays offensively. I think when you run the football, hopefully you can do that in the passing game because people worry about the run. What I like to be, and I like to be what players are good at. So we're going to find out who the best players are, and then try to pepper them the ball as many different ways as we can. And then, just keep people off balance. We try to be a little bit more on the end. And, I always say this, I hope our offense is multiple enough. So one week we may look one way, but the next week we look like something else. It may be short passes this whole game because of what we're seeing in coverage. And then the next week, maybe it's deep shots all game. So it's a factor of one, what you're good at, but two, also what type of team you're facing. I always think, is probably the smartest way to go about it.
And that versatility, I guess that's more important than anything than having, say our offense is this, and more important to just be like, our offense can do this, and this, depending on what's getting thrown at us.
Yeah, I think an important piece of the puzzle is your preparation. Like we're doing this week, yesterday, our staff talked about our training camp and stuff, and went through the first 12 days of training camp and what that would look like, and go through the practice plans. There's been a lot of talk about using 3 quarterbacks last year, and what we did with a guy named Chris Trevler, who's now Cardinals. Well, every day in training camp, like when he had his reps, some of the stuff we were running week 15, 16, 17 of the season, he was running in training camp. So you just have to have some advanced thinking of making sure you're working on being multiple early in training camp when you have the most reps. That's when you really want to, most meeting time, most reps. That's when you want to get your players to really push them the envelope of what they can do and what they can learn, and then that can show up later in the year.
Great. I'll give this one to both of you from our youngest participant here, starting with you, Marcel. This is from 10-year-old Brendan. He wants to know what the most exciting game that you've been a part of in your career in football. I have a guess, but we'll let you answer first.
Well, I'm not going to go to the 2009 Grey Cup game, so I will go to the.
Thank you, please. Thank you.
But I will say, I mean, obviously in terms of a game, I mean, the 2015 division final here with a 2nd and 25, I mean, that atmosphere at the stadium was something that really still reverberates with me today. And then a close second, obviously, is the 2016 Grey Cup.
Absolutely. What about you, Apo?
Okay, that's interesting. I would say as an assistant, there is a game, and I'll say 3 games. I'll say I was an assistant coach in a game in 2002 where the Bombers were down. The offense scored the Bombers, and we scored like 2 touchdowns in a minute 10 or something. It was just a crazy atmosphere, and we was able to come back and we tied. I think we won 41-40 in like double overtime, and Arlen Bruce caught 3 touchdowns, in 2 of them in overtime. I guess my time as a head coach, an amazing game was we were the same scenario. We were down big, and then with a minute 10 left, we scored 2. Well, we came back from a huge deficit to come back and score on Thanksgiving Day one year in 2010 to get a huge win. And obviously in 17, we beat Montreal in the last play of the game, coming back to win, and we scored with no time on the clock. It was amazing. But it's hard to really beat the 2019 Grey Cup. So I've been part of 2 Grey Cups, but just being part of somebody who could break the streak was amazing.
Hard to pick just one when you've been around this game for a little bit.
Yeah.
This one's for you, Paul. This is from Frankie. How should we expect to see Anthony Coombs used this year?
Yeah, certainly when I first met Anthony, I was a guest coach of the Argos a couple years back, and I was just impressed with him as a slot receiver. I thought he could do a lot of different things, and he had a skippability, he had speed. I know in the draft he was somebody that a lot of people liked for his explosiveness. So like being able to be at training camp a couple months later, and he was really good. And I thought that, the last couple of years he's been kind of used as more of a back in the backfield than in the slot. And I still think he's got a great career as a slot receiver. The thing we like about his abilities is we can actually use him as a running back at times and make it harder for defenses. Maybe run the same play as everybody else runs the league, but it's a little different when you got to defensively, you have to think about a lot more things when you're running the same play, but it's just to a tailback. So we hope that he can provide some versatility and some a guy who can put the ball in his hands and he'll make people miss and make plays.
Great. Marcel, Pierre wants to know what you think some of the most significant moves we've made this offseason. Maybe picking something like Nick Arbuckle signing is an obvious one for most people. It's a very significant move, but maybe a couple of the other ones that people may not get as many headlines and players that you're excited about having brought into Ottawa so far in the offseason.
Well, I mean, I think anytime you're able to add quality players to your roster, I mean, you have to be excited about those. And I hate to pick a few guys, but if you're going to think about how we now have greater ratio flexibility with Anthony Coombs, with Cleon Lang, with Christopher Malumba, I mean, we have options now. We, in addition to the guys that we retained, going into this free agency period this past year. So, just having those guys and having that flexibility, even adding a guy like Jalen Saunders later in the offseason, they're all important pieces. I mean, at the end of the day, you just don't know how it's going to play out. for the simple reason that, training camp dictates a lot of that, and a lot of the circumstances, you can't control relative to a player's health or whatnot. So the more quality guys you have, certainly Canadian, but in general, to give you as much flexibility as possible is great. If I were to take a step back and just make a non-player addition comment, and I'm not doing it because Lapo's on the other end here, but at the end of the day, I mean, adding somebody who's been around this league, has been a head coach, has a vision for how he wants to do things, and as much as he and the coaching staff may not have been here in the office, obviously because of the circumstances as much as in other years, just seeing not only the creativity on the field and what he wants to do, but also just what his vision is for what he wants his environment to be. Those are all things that I think we needed as a change of pace, as a fresh approach. And it's, it's obviously, from Lapo, it's gone, down to his coaching staff, and they're all kind of on the same page where that's concerned. And it's rejuvenating, I guess, is the best way to put it.
This is a good question, Paul. How do you, I guess, keep players motivated and engaged during this? You've touched on meetings with different positional players and having that virtual contact. But is that something that you think about, making sure that these guys are pros, so we know that they're staying fit and they're working out? But how do you approach that and making sure that these guys kind of stay in that right mindset without and necessarily knowing when they're going to have to get here, but keeping that focus kind of at a decent level?
I think you're just trying your best to make sure you have stuff available to them to go ahead and keep working through their processes, right? So you just want to make sure you have enough available for them to keep learning. That's what we've been trying to do.
Do you guys, either of you could take this one. Lordell's asking about Americans on the offensive line, and then the prospect of that with the flexibility we've got to start Canadians elsewhere potentially.
Yeah, like when you ask what additions to the roster that has helped, we didn't have to do anything up front, right? And so Marcel's done a really good. You look at our offensive line. With Mateus, Johnson, Corday, McMillan, we have a solid crew of guys that we invested a lot in the draft and have really paid off as linemen. So we have the flexibility to play 4 if possible, and then so. I know last year at times they played 5, and we'll have Jason still here in the building. So, we've got the ability to do what we need to do. We certainly will figure out what the best situation is, whether it's 3, 4, or 5. But that's a really good thing for us to have that much depth, and you don't have to think about really going in free agency or other teams trying to go to free agency to get help with the line. We already had it in the building.
Marcel, here's a super easy one from Peter. Is there ever going to be a star Canadian quarterback in the CFL again?
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be at some point. I mean, but the circumstances have to be right. Meaning, the team, meaning the rules. A lot of things have to fall into place for that to occur. There are some very good ones that have recently, or have just come out of U Sport or NCAA football, and I think those guys all have a chance to play at a high level and start, eventually. But the circumstances have to fall into place. And again, the rules have to permit you in terms of the roster structure to be able to give these guys a chance to develop.
What do you think about that, Paul? Obviously, you work with some great quarterbacks. Do you see that opportunity? Do you have the same kind of feeling as Marcel there? A lot of people see this as would be a huge boon to the CFL at some point if we can, there could be one even.
Well, the first thing I think people have to have this understanding is there's 32 guys, there's 32 NFL starters, right? And then there's, the 9 starters. So there's 41 people starting in pro football in the major 2 leagues. So that's quite a minority, right? There's just not that many opportunities for people to play. So, I feel sometimes we're always trying to just push some of the guys when they maybe not be ready. And certainly Nathan worked at in college. He deserves a merit to go compete, right, for what he's put on tape and what he's done. And then, you'll certainly have other guys who will have those opportunities. But, it's just they're competing with, every year there's 400 other guys that they're going to go ahead and compete with. So, I certainly think what has been better is I think the teaching is getting better and more people are looking. I have a good friend who's the offense coordinator of the Penn State Nittany Lions. Well, he just signed a quarterback in his draft class, and that kid's from New Orleans. So, I think the more opportunities for guys down in the U.S., and then they can come up and have that opportunity to compete. So, it's, I think it's only getting better with the better coachings happening by Canadian guys, coaching up those kids in high school.
But it's got to be right, like you said, right? It's not fair to anyone if you say, like, you're anointing kids that maybe aren't at that point, saying you're going to be the next great Canadian thing because we need a Canadian quarterback.
It's a little unfair for those guys, and there's no prejudice. Like, the coaches aren't prejudiced about, is the guy Canadian, is he American, where is he from? Like, it's who are the best players, right? So who are the guys who will perform? And it's a small group. Like I said, there's only 41 of them starting across the, in the world right now. So it's hard echelon to make it to.
Another draft one for you, Marcel, and I've seen this one a couple times, about Ketel Ase and why you think he fell to the 8th round, and how you see him playing out as a potential CFLer.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, the first thing I would say is you can't really speculate what other teams may have been thinking. I can only tell people what we were thinking. We did not have him rated as a first-round pick as much as the pre-draft mumbles were that he may go in the first round, but we didn't have him as an 8th-round pick either. We had him somewhere in between. And when he was still there in the 8th round, I felt it was something that made sense for us. But there could be 101 reasons why other teams felt that they didn't want to select him. At the end of the day, all we can hope is that this is the reality check that he needed, and that he'll come to camp whenever that is and really fight to win a job.
It's almost like all the experts aren't always bang on when they tell you that they can't believe this guy fell this. This is a perfect example that you guys aren't sitting there reading all the hype when you're making your decisions, because if you did that, God knows what would happen.
Well, unfortunately, the other part of the equation as it relates to the scouting bureau that's put out is that not all teams necessarily put forth the names that they may feel are in the top 20. They may put names on there such as his, even though they had him maybe rated a lot lower. So it's kind of a little deceiving sometimes as to what the scouting bureau actually provides.
Got a French question for you, Marcel, from our francophone ambassador, Jean-Guy Gourley. De tous les choix du repêchage de cette année, lequel des joueurs est le plus prêt à se tailler une place dans l'alignement partant du Rouge et Noir cette année? So that, for those of you, just to translate, and I'll translate Marcel's answer after, but which draft player drafted by us this year is the most likely to potentially be seen in the Redblacks lineup this year?
Quand tu parles d'un joueur qui va être un partant du côté offensif ou défensif, c'est difficile à dire. Écoute, Adam Auclair est le joueur qu'on a choisi en première ronde. Il y a une raison pour ça. C'est un joueur qui est très polyvalent. Est-ce qu'il pourrait jouer éventuellement défensivement? Oui, mais c'est certainement pas une nécessité présentement. Je dirais tout simplement que ça soit un choix de première ronde ou un choix de 8e ronde, c'est les joueurs qui se présentent au camp d'entraînement, qui vont compétitionner. Ensuite, ça va être entre le groupe de dépistage et les entraîneurs à décider comment mieux formuler notre alignement pour prendre avantage des atouts canadiens que l'on a.
And I'll just let you answer that one in English too, because it's been asked a couple times as well. But like you said, probably, a first-round pick's always usually got the shoe in, but it's ultimately up to the coaches and then the staff to evaluate, and for these guys to come in and work their butts off to earn that spot.
Yeah, again, in terms of having a who is most ready to start on offense or defense, I mean, that's hard to say. I mean, again, it's a function of letting camp play out, allowing us to make decisions based on what we see during camp, and then also making decisions based on how we feel our ratio is maximized in terms of getting the best Canadians on the field. But again, you need to see guys perform in our environment to be able to make those decisions. At the end of the day, the players we drafted are all quality players, and we'll just, we'll be patient and see how it plays out.
So, I'll go to you with this one, Paul. Just someone's asking about Paul is asking about the global players, and then obviously we have a couple in Billy and Jose. But do you see that them having a bigger role? Do you see the global players in general starting to make a bit more of a name for themselves as this becomes something that's not so brand new?
Well, I do think the league is invested, and everything we've heard about the talent pool that is in this year's draft. I mean, they've just got eyes on more players and the alliances they make with other countries. So it's just kind of made that pool of football players so much bigger. And, and as that happens, and there's more talented players, they get more opportunities. And certainly our roster is reflecting a second global player this year. So, yeah, it's certainly something that, we'll try to see more people who can contribute on a weekly basis.
And Marcel, like this is coming up a few times. Everyone wants to know if there's going to be more signings, who it's going to be. I'm not going to get you into specific names. I think you can imagine who some of those high-priced big names are. Do you see yourself adding more pieces here as we go along, significant, smaller depth pieces or otherwise?
No, I mean, I would say for the most part, we're going to stay where we're at for right now, man. Again, until we have a better sense as to when camp's going to start and all of those things, I think we'll just hold off. Look, we do have a couple of offers out to guys who have been in the CFL before, guys who we think can help us, but we're also limited in what we can offer them. And look, if at some point they decide to accept what we offer, then that's great. If not, we understand. But to say we're going to go make a big splash between now and the start of the season in terms of the signing, that's not going to be the case, at least from a financial standpoint.
We've got questions rolling in. We've got about 70 people online right now. Marcel, another one for you about the lack of a combine. How did that affect, and this goes to, I guess, everything, but everything was a bit affected by the things that were canceled in terms of ability to scout and all that. But do you think that was putting teams at a huge disadvantage to not have that kind of face-to-face interaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was not having accurate measurables, whether that be height, weight, arm, hand, wingspan, all of that stuff, or whether that be the actual testing numbers. So that's part of it. As far as the interviews, I mean, yeah, it's nice to sit in a room with the same person and have that dialogue go back and forth and just have a better feel for how they react to certain things. We did do it online, so we did get the information we needed. So for the most part, that part of it was accurate. But the other, when you look across the league, everybody was in the same boat, so nobody really had any advantages. So, it is what it is. We dealt with it as best we can. We felt we did relatively well with it. And you know what? If it happens again where we're in those circumstances for different reasons, then we'll be ready to deal with it.
Paul, there's been a few more questions just about talking about quarterbacks. Obviously, Arbuckle here is as the top guy, but in terms of having a guy like Dom Davis in the mix, and we've brought in a couple other quarterbacks, how do you see that competition playing out, and how do you see? Obviously, you're well known for having had success with multiple quarterbacks in your system. How do you see that coming together? Are you excited about the opportunities that gives you as a coach?
Yeah, we certainly, Dom's got experience in our system. That by no means grants him the number 2 job. He still has to earn it, competing with, some of the other guys we've signed. And then what we'll try to do is if one of those players, right, whoever our number 2 is, has a redeeming quality to be able to stay on the field and take touches away from Nick, well, then we'll start building a package for that. And, and certainly we'll see if we've got the capability of doing that. And, because certainly, if you're just putting a guy out there just to do a changeup, like the guy's got to be able to be a productive football player. So certainly, again, you don't want to take away touches from your starter, but you will if you've got somebody who can be productive with the ball and do some other things. And that's what we'll try to evaluate as we go forward. And, certainly Dom's got some athletic ability, but, he can move around a little bit. And that was something that he would be able to do in some instances, but we'll see as camp plays out.
A couple questions from different people on Devontae Dedmon. I'll go to you with Marcel with this one first, because you were here with him last year. What was your take on what he was able to do when he was healthy? What's his health status now? And Lapo, you can follow that up with just a thought on Dedmon and what he showed last year that you saw on tape and what he can bring again this year.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing with Devontae is just how explosive and strong he is, how he catches the ball relatively well. I mean, he's got great balance, good vision, all of those things. The sad part, like you stated, is just he could not stay healthy last year. He's obviously trending well at this time of the off season, and we fully expect him to come to camp and be completely healthy. The biggest thing with him is just his hunger and his desire to get better every day, and this is important to him, and he wants to do things the right way and have success doing it.
Yeah, and I think Dedmon, for us is going to be somebody we just slap into a receiver role and see how we can utilize him, right? He's got short space quickness. He can make you miss in a phone booth. He's explosive. So that's somebody you want to get the ball in space to. So you'll try to build packages to get him the ball in space, whether it's speed sweeps or receiver screens, whatever you can do to get him touches so he can make things happen. And again, we want to have a back that we want to give him as much as he's comfortable with, right? Whether he's a starting receiver for us, whether he's a role player receiver and a returner, we'll wear him out and let him handle as much as he can.
And this was asked by Dennis Krause in French. Est-ce qu'on va utiliser Sinopoli plus cette saison? Paul, he was asking, there was obviously some frustration last year by some fans that they saw that Sinopoli wasn't used as much as they would have liked to have seen him. What are your thoughts on that? And, obviously Brad's a guy that can make things happen with his yards after catch and just his, skill level overall.
Well, I appreciate the fans' frustration, but that's their frustration. We have to, again, we're always trying to figure out what we can do to win football games, right? Whether it's the running back touching it so many times and this person not touching it. Again, Brad Sinopoli's here because he's a good football player and productive. So we expect him to touch the football, but because he's a fan favorite doesn't mean we have to get him that many touches. We get him touches because he's a good football player. I really don't want – I hope each week that our players go into it not ever worried about how many touches they get. I hope they just care about doing whatever it takes to win. And certainly, I've had many conversations with Brad, and I'm just excited to work with him because he's a big target. He catches the ball well. He's good after the catch, like you said. And I think he's going to be a great leader in the room. So looking forward to coaching him.
Well, and a guy like Brad would say the exact same thing when you bring this up to him. Like he's the kind of that team guy. He'd say, if the team's winning, doesn't if guys are on him, it opens up somebody else. And I don't think that's ever been a thought in Brad's mind, but it's certainly that's something that's come up in the past. Yep. What else do we have here? Couple other questions on Arbuckle, Marcel, in terms of acquiring him. People still there's some people thought there was some risk there swapping first round picks. Ultimately, we were able to get Nick signed. What was it about him for you that did you see it as a risk making that pick swap, and why did you go overall? Why did you make that move?
Well, the initial, step in the process of acquiring him was to give up the third round pick just for the rights to be able to talk to him before free agency. So we felt that was important for the simple reason that, having that access, that unique access to him would be good. And the other part of it, just simply that, we just thought that we had a territorial pick at the end of the second round. So that would kind of offset that third round pick a little bit. So weren't too concerned about that relative to flipping picks if we had him signed. So the risk there was very minimal. If we didn't get him signed, there was no risk. But by signing him, we drafted 6th overall. We've drafted 7th, 8th, 9th in the past, and we've always been able to get a good football player in the first round. So we certainly didn't have any concerns about having to drop to 6th versus 1st. And then again, obviously getting a quarterback was a key piece for us, and getting that certainty early was also an important factor. So that's why when Lapo and I talked about it, and he's a guy that I know Coach Lapo focused in on, and we felt that he'd be able to help us. Again, sacrificing what we sacrificed at the end of the day, we felt was very much worthwhile, and the timing allowed us to do it in a way that, kind of set our roster in the right direction from the get-go.
And a totally unrelated one, Mars. Greg wants to know who's in what Habs player is in the picture on top of your cabinet there.
That is Mike McPhee. And the reason I have that picture is because when I was with the Alouettes, I had his daughter, Allie, as an intern with us. And I guess people would reference my receding hairline and my mustache only at the time, as we were kind of comparable in terms of how we looked. So she actually got me an autographed picture from him, and he said sorry about the stash in the signature. So
nice.
And obviously I was a big Habs fan growing up, so part of it too.
What about you, Paul? What are you doing when you're not working out in the peg right now?
Yeah, just trying to spend time with the kids and everything, and we're getting ready to move to Ottawa in a couple of weeks, so just trying to get the house sorted out and organized. So just working on those processes, and it's good to actually be able to be home for this process to actually happen. Sometimes in coaching, people don't understand that the coaches just move to the next spot, and the wives have to do all the extra work and do everything and bring up the rear. So it's good to be able to try to do football all morning, but then in the afternoon be able to spend some time with the kids and go for walks.
Because you were kind of right in between when all this happened. You were here, family was back home, trying to get everything sorted to get everyone here. So
yeah,
get a little bit more time to organize.
Yep.
Marcel, this has come up a couple times too. Well, just general questions on injury updates from last year. A significant one being John Rose, who obviously had some injury issues. What's his status, and as it relates to his injury and his position here?
Not a lot to update there. He is still not cleared to play or practice or participate in anything. That timeline is going to continue to be long. It's obviously harder to keep tabs on it, based on the current predicament that we're in, and him not being able to be around here. But, a quality player, quality person. But at the end of the day, the injury thing may be too much for him to overcome, but we'll see how that plays out.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to leave it there, guys. I really appreciate the time. I'll let you guys get back to work. I just want to give a quick shout out and a big thank you to everyone that joined us and watching this first edition of Inside Our Nation Live. My apologies. This is an exclusive access event and perk for all season seat members. Please keep sending us questions if you have more. We'll try to do this again, and reach out to your account rep if you have other questions, want to get more people involved. And we're really excited to see you guys at TD Place for a game when that happens, and it will happen eventually. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Paul LaPolice, Marcel Desjardins. Have a great day.
Thanks, Our Nation.